Morning, everybody. We're going to look at Chapter 5 of Animal Farm today. So if you could get your books open to, looks like page 61, that's where we're going to start. So Chapter 5 opens up with Molly, and we find out that Molly's been sort of troublesome lately, causing a lot of grief. And a couple of things she's been doing has just been, being late for work, claiming that she's overslept. She's complaining about mysterious pains that she's experiencing, even though her appetite's just fine. We've got her, ditching work to go look at herself in the reflecting pool. And probably the most disturbing one of all is that she's communicating with men on other farms. And this is actually something that Clover brings up to her. And as you can expect, Molly denies this sort of thing. But when Clover goes to her stall and overturns some hay, she finds out that, Molly's got lumps of sugar there and she's got ribbons. And this could only mean, these items could have only been gotten from, associating with men. So after this has been discovered, we notice that Molly sort of ditches the farm, and, we don't really see her after that. We have no idea where she is, and, that's kind of it regarding Molly. I wanted to make a connection outside of the text to history, because remember, we're kind of going back and forth here and looking at who each animal represents. Molly represents the group, the bourgeois, in Russia, and what that means is that she's representing the middle class, okay? And the middle class in that time, they were not really interested in the greater good of the revolution. They were really more so just concerned with themselves, and eventually ended up fleeing the country when they believed things wouldn't work out for them, much like Molly did when she fled the farm. They're more concerned with the trappings that are offered, in other countries, or just things that aren't really of concern. So, my questions to you, or questions to consider, would be that, are these people to be blamed for fleeing the country? Do you understand why they did what they did? That's something that you kind of need to decide here. I also wanted to move on from Molly and kind of talk about some changes that have been made to the farm in Chapter 5 in terms of decision making, actually. Let me read this to you on page 62. It says, "It came to be accepted that the pigs, who were manifestly cleverer than the other animals, should decide all questions of farm policy, though their decisions had to be ratified by a majority vote." So, it's interesting that now we have the pigs making those decisions, and it really shows that another subtle move toward inequality. Okay, so it's just a little at a time. While there's still some majority vote, like there's still some say, it's mostly them. Okay, so moving forward, we also have on page 63 that we've got the sheep that continue to bleat the phrase 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. Remember, this was discussed in previous chapters where they kind of simplified the rules. It came down to really just one important one, and this is it. We discussed the fact that is an oversimplification. It sort of will cause eventually the animals to forget the other commandments and would allow the pigs to break some of those rules. We also have, we discussed the fact that just because, an animal has 4 legs doesn't make them good. So, anyway, the sheep don't seem to consider this, and they just bleat this out and actually interrupt meetings with this phrase. I wanted to discuss who the sheep represents in reality. The sheep represent the nameless, faceless people, masses of people actually, who don't think for themselves. They just spew out phrases that have been told to them without questioning them, without really knowing why they're saying what they're saying. It's just their thoughtless allegiance, okay? They don't challenge their leaders on it, okay? They don't ask why. So that's who the sheep represents, and this could go far beyond even just Russian history. It could apply to any country at any time, if this is occurring. So anyway, another phrase that I wanted to read to you that sort of reflects their blind beliefs would be the animals listening to Napoleon, and then they listen to Snowball, and they listen to Napoleon, and then they listen to Snowball, and they can't make up their minds who is right. In fact, they side with whoever's speaking at the time. So it's just, whoever's speaking last, I believe them. It's not really critical thinking there. Okay, so I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about this sheep. Moving forward, we also know that there are some plans to build a windmill, which is a good thing, right? Snowball seems to be the one that's really trying to push for this because he believes that it will make life easier on them to have this electrical power. Shows us that he has the animals' interests at heart, or at least we think so. On the other hand, we've got Napoleon, who completely opposes the windmill. That's something to remember. He is not in support of the windmill. In fact, to show his lack of support, he urinates on Snowball's plans. Okay, it's at this moment and going forward that we see differences in Napoleon and Snowball and their leadership styles. Snowball's clearly a better public speaker. We've got Napoleon, on the other hand, who is pretty cunning, but he doesn't play fair. A question that I want to ask you at this moment, is for you to think about is what comments might Orwell be making about leadership battles, okay? With this whole incident on the opposition of the windmill and Napoleon sort of peeing on Snowball's plans. We have a lot of animals that are kind of like struggling with the idea of the windmill, but there is one that doesn't seem to have an opinion one way or the other. And I'm sure you can imagine that, or you already know this, but Benjamin is that animal. He doesn't side with either faction, and he seems to take this indifferent approach to the whole thing. Remember, I believe it's a previous chapter that we talked about, who Benjamin represents. He actually represents the intellectuals, those who are educated and clearly intelligent enough, but they don't play an active role in politics. They don't stand up to authority. If we're looking at the Russian history specifically, it's the people who failed to oppose Stalin, that had the ability to do so, that had the thought process to do so, and they didn't. So anyway, that's something to remember. Okay, moving forward, we also discover what has happened to the puppies, and it's not good. They have been taken from their mother at a very young age, a very impressionable age, and they've been trained and they've been brainwashed to enforce anything that Napoleon says. If we're connecting this to Russian history, they represent the KGB, okay, the secret police, who Stalin used to carry out his dirty work. And this says a lot about, going back to the book, it says a lot about Napoleon's leadership. So his brainwashing the puppies. He seems to take this dictatorial approach when it comes to leadership. It doesn't bode well for animals in the future. His behavior, if you reflect back, is very similar to that of Mr. Jones, which was the whole reason why the animals rebelled in the first place, because they didn't like those conditions. But here we are, 5 chapters in, having the same exact things happening. Okay, again, we should be concerned for them at this moment. We've got Napoleon in this chapter also running Snowball off the farm, and he's now taken full control. Things changed drastically after that. We've got the democratic meetings being abolished. We've got this clear shifting of power on the farm. And, you got to wonder, why aren't these animals protesting these changes? Why aren't they standing up to Napoleon? Reflect back to what we've said before. There's this imbalance of education. It makes it extremely difficult for the animals to protest because they lack the arguments that are needed to oppose Napoleon, needed to stop him. Not only that, but they're terrified of the dogs. Napoleon's instilled fear in these others. They saw what happened to Snowball. They wouldn't want that happening to them. Okay. We also have Napoleon uses another tool to kind of keep in control, and that's Squealer. Okay, he's basically used to placate the other animals. If we looked at who Squealer represents, he actually stands for the Pravda in Russian history, which was the official newspaper of the Communist Party. And I did some research here, and I wanted to look up what Pravda actually translates to. So in Russian, it means the truth. This is what they're putting out there as the truth. If you look more into the Pravda, there were letters from readers. They were officially sponsored and approved materials to indoctrinate and inform readers on communist theory and programs. So this is what the materials they put out there through the Pravda to get people to agree and sort of support communism. Okay, it was propaganda. Okay, we've got Squealer basically being the propaganda machine for the pigs. look at the ways in which he manipulates the other animals. We've talked about this before. We're going to re-examine again today. You know, he uses a variety of the same exact techniques. He's got these tools in his arsenal. He uses camaraderie. So he uses comrades, friends, we're together, you know, we're equal. He also uses fear. He uses rhetorical questions and also blatant lies. So this is more of the same. He gets the animals to believe that Snowball, for instance, is a criminal, that he's been an enemy of the animals, and he was the one who had stolen Napoleon's plans for the windmill, and that, and claimed them for his own. So Snowball was never the one in support of the windmill. It's always been Napoleon. Snowball had just been lying to you. He also says that, Napoleon seemed to oppose the windmill, and he used that as a maneuver to get rid of Snowball, okay? We know these are lies, but the animals seems to work for him, okay? Especially Boxer. Let me read some of his comments here. He likes to say, if Comrade Napoleon says it, it must be right, or Napoleon is always right. Note that he has no idea why Napoleon is right, but he accepts what he is told anyway. This is dangerous, not only to the animals in the novel, but to anyone in real life. Oh, well, if that leader says it, it must be true. No investigation done to know, to support that, but yep, that must be all that, that's saying is the truth. So it's probably a comment that Orwell is trying to make here, okay? Another question that I want you to consider at this point is, could Napoleon be successful without somebody like Squealer? I wouldn't think so, but that's probably a matter of your opinion. Just kind of like to pose one final thing to you, and to sort of close this chapter, I want you to make a list of all the things that have changed already on the farm since the animals have taken over. How different is it than the one that Old Major had dreamed about? I want you to think about, excuse me, I had to sneeze. Excuse me. I want you to consider, whether or not these changes were subtle or were they dramatic. I want you to, again, think about why the animals aren't resisting more than they have. Do they even realize what's going on? And then finally, how does power shift in society as a whole, going beyond the text itself? So that's how I want to close this chapter. Email me if you have any questions about it. See ya.